UFC Fight Night Saudi Arabia is officially in the books, which means that it is time for me to give my full card post-fight recap analysis. Man, this is one of those moments that we see in MMA, specifically in the UFC, the passing of the torch moment, where we get the OG legend, the guy that's been around like Israel Adesanya, been there, done that, and he goes in there against a surging, rising contender in Nassourdine Imavov. And Nassourdine just showed out, man. Goes in there. It's almost like he knew something that we didn't know, right? And what I mean is I'm not shocked that Imavov won the fight, but the way that he went in there and he was very casual in the first round. Izzy looked very good, and then Imavov goes out there and does that. Absolutely spectacular. And then in the co-main event, to see MVP go in there and absolutely style on Shara Magomedov, wasn't surprised one bit, right? I know a lot of people were saying if Shara's going to get fraud checked, man, he's going to get fraud checked at some point. I think a lot of people thought it was going to be a grappler, right? But going in there against Venom Page, he was set up for a big moment, because if Shara could go in there and beat MVP, what a huge win that would be. But MVP is just different on the feet. So we're gonna go over every single fight on the card. But overall, man, this card was kind of like meh, right? Because the first fight of the night we had, controversy, which I'll discuss. Then we kind of had these, boring decisions. We had a staring contest kind of at heavyweight. So we had a little bit of, these lulls in the card. But what Imavov did in the main event was nothing shy of absolutely spectacular. So let's start right there with the main event between Israel Adesanya and Nassourdine Imavov. And disclaimer, the UFC's website, they almost never have the stats right, so I'm not even going to go through and read them. We're just going to talk about kind of what we saw as the fights were unfolding, man, because when we talk about Israel Adesanya, right, this is a guy who he's one of the greatest middleweights of all time, right? He's right up there. He's been there, done that in the middleweight division. He's one of the best strikers that we've seen in the UFC. And in the first round, I thought Izzy looked really good, right? And throughout his walkout, he kind of had that intense look that reminded me of when he came out at UFC 281 against Alex Pereira. I know that Izzy ended up losing that fight as he was doing very well, and then Pereira came back later in the fight and was able to get the finish. But it reminded me of that vibe of Izzy, right? The instrumental music as he was walking out, this kind of, darkness to him, to where he's very intense, very ready to go. And he looked good in the first round. He was landing a lot of good shots, was mixing up the targets, attacking the lead leg of Nassourdine, going to the body, got the jab going, defended some takedowns incredibly well, which I thought Imavov was going to be able to secure some ground time, especially early in the fight. That didn't happen at all. And if you're sitting here telling me that all of that happens in the first round, I'm like, this is, almost best case scenario for Izzy. He looked absolutely spectacular in the first round. And just going off of what I saw, I thought Izzy won the first round. I thought he did a very, very good job. And then in the second round, it's almost like a completely different fight. Nassourdine Imavov acts like nothing happened in the first round, just casually moving forward, bouncing around, steps in with a 1-2, throws the overhand right over the guard of Adesanya and drops him, and then finishes him with some shots on the ground. And then we got the stoppage by Mark Goddard. It was a good stoppage, right? Because I thought Israel Adesanya, the way he was kind of face down, moving around, he wasn't intelligently defending himself, and he wasn't going to come back from that, right? Nassourdine Imavov is a very dangerous opponent. This is one of those moments. We see this in the UFC. We saw it, with Anderson Silva on his decline, where we see a guy that was once, the guy reigning over the division, and they go on a little bit of a skid, and then they run into that up-and-coming guy that is just very dangerous in Nassourdine Imavov, who goes in there and gets the job done. And while Izzy looked great in the first round, we saw some things from Nassourdine that are just what we kind of knew coming into this. The speed that this man possesses in terms of the striking is some of the best, if not the best, in the weight class at present, right? The way that he bounces in and out of range. And I know that him and Cyril Gane are not training partners anymore. Nassourdine kind of moved camps. Nassourdine's a guy that started off with boxing. And when you watch his style, it's very similar to Gane, right? He's very light on the feet, kind of bouncing around, floats in and out of range. But it almost like when I said it's like he knew something that we didn't know, it was as soon as Adesanya reached his hands out like this, which Adesanya always has done in the past. He utilizes his reach and grabs, guys' hands, grabs their arms, and tries to control them, right? And tries to keep them off of him. But with Imavov, he understood I can't just sit on the outside against Izzy, which is kind of what happened in the first round. And then he's like, okay, Izzy's takedown defense is looking pretty good, so I got to put my foot on the gas. I got to get in his face, and I got to crush rush the space. I can't sit on the outside against Izzy, and that is exactly what Nassourdine did. The way that he closed the distance with that 1-2 was lightning fast. The hand speed was dangerous, and he kind of uncorked the right hand very he just kind of swung it right around the guard as Izzy extended, because I think Nassourdine knew coming into this, Izzy is going to try to keep me away from him, right? And as the fight plays out, Izzy tends to reach a lot to try to control guys' hands, control the range. And Nassourdine waited for him to do that. And then, because if your hands are out and away, you're obviously not protecting your face. That shot came right around the guard. It was a perfectly timed shot by Nassourdine Imavov. This was an incredible performance. But like I said, everyone's going to say, Izzy's washed. I don't think he's washed, man. I don't think he's washed. I thought he had a very, very, very good first round. I thought that was against a surging young contender who is a guy that puts his foot on the gas and has all this momentum behind him in Imavov. Izzy was doing very well, right? He had everything kind of going. Imavov throws those little kind of oblique shots to kind of pick at you, back you up, move forward. It was a very tactical and methodical approach from Imavov. But like I said before with Imavov, he has very good wrestling, but he doesn't have the best offensive style when it comes to the grappling. And what I was kind of worried about on the side of Nassourdine is if he couldn't get a finish like he did against Izzy, because, it's going to just come down to assumptions at this point because he went out there and got the job done. But the way he was chasing after those takedowns and not having success, I was like, if he's going to be stuck in front of Izzy and chasing takedowns and them getting, shut down, and then we get into those middle to later rounds, I could see Nassourdine slowing down, and then we see Izzy just absolutely take over, with that championship experience and the way that Izzy just basically doesn't fade as the fights play out. This was a spectacular performance by Nassourdine Imavov, and that moment in his career that just sends him to the next level, man. He's legit. He goes in there. He's already a guy that has a very good skill set. My critiques of Nassourdine have always been, well, which guy's going to show up, right? Is it the guy? Because I said that he was going to go in there and beat up on Brennan Allen, and he won the fight, but he didn't really showcase all of what we know about Imavov, and that's kind of been my critique. He's hot and cold. It's like one night his striking looks good, the next night it looks off, then it's his grappling looks good, then it looks off, and then he gets tired, and it's always been something with Imavov. But with this new camp, the way that they're kind of putting everything together, this man is a serious threat inside of the middleweight division, which brings me to my final point about this. He calls for a title opportunity, right? And you guys know that I'm the biggest Hamza Chimaev fan that you're basically going to find. Nassourdine made himself a very good case here. He made himself a very good case. Now, I do believe that Hamza Chimaev is going to be next in line, because when you go out there and you beat Robert Whittaker that way, we've never seen that before, right? We have not seen that before, and Israel Adesanya is coming off of a 2-fight losing streak to where Robert Whittaker had won 2 fights coming into the Hamza fight, right? So I'm just kind of going off of, because what happens with fighting is we become prisoners of the moment, and we kind of forget and this and that, and what we've seen from the UFC as well. A lot of us thought that Hamza should have gotten the shot over Strickland, right? But they still went with, because it was a close fight the first time, the UFC hung on to that. So I don't believe that the UFC is going to give Imavov the next shot. I think that maybe he waits and then sees how the Hamzat, whoever it's going to be, if it's DDP versus Hamzat or Sean versus Hamzat, I think it's going to be DDP versus Hamzat. Nassourdine is absolutely going to be next in line. This guy is absolutely dangerous. He's spectacular. And when you go out there and do that to Israel Adesanya, that's just not something we've seen. Even when Alex Pineda beat this guy in MMA, it was in the 5th round after Izzy was putting a beating on him. I shouldn't say putting a beating on him, but was picking him apart. He was picking him apart. And then DDP, he got him out of there with a submission, but Izzy was tuning him up on the feet. So Nassourdine moved forward early in the 2nd round and drops this guy with a vicious overhand right. Nassourdine's legit, absolutely put himself. If Hamza didn't do what he did to Robert Whittaker and won a decision over Whittaker or whatever, Nassourdine's getting the next opportunity. This guy's in line. He's dangerous. He's got very good grappling, offensive and defensive. I was impressed with what we saw from Adesanya as well. I know it was hard to see, man. It was hard to see whether you're an Izzy fan or not. This is one of my favorite guys to watch in terms of the striking. The way that his footwork, the timing, the movement, everything about Izzy, and just his mindset and all these different things. He's one of my favorites, man. And he goes out there, and to see him get, finished like that, it was hard to see. But on the flip side, This was a sensational performance by Nassourdine Imavov. The guy's legit. This was the big opportunity that he had to go out there against Adesanya, and he cashed in. Well done by Nassourdine Imavov. I don't think he's next. Well, I think he's like next, because I don't think he's probably going to fight again before he fights for the title. I think it'll be Hamzat next, and then Imavov will fight, whoever the winner is at that time. I think Imavov and Hamzat have trained together, so I'm sure that that's a little bit awkward, but Imavov, dude's dangerous, man. He's spectacular since shifting his camp here, and his focus has just kind of changed. Dude's a savage, man. Absolutely like watching the guy fight, and to go in there and beat Adesanya like that, got to give him his props, man. Well done by Nassourdine Imavov. Moving on, co-main event of the evening between Shara Bullet, the Pirate, Magomedov versus Michael Venom Page. This is exactly what I was expecting in this matchup. Look, Shara Magomedov, he's got the look. He's got the voice. He's got like the aura to him, right? He's got the, the pirate thing going on, and he's spectacular, right? He goes out there against Armen Petrosyan and lands the double spinning back fist. Like, where the hell do you see a knockout like that, right? Goes out there, comes up with that creative knockout. He's got, spectacular kicks. He's just very, very good in terms of the striking. But guys, I told you, there's levels when it comes to the striking, man. I've been watching a lot of the people that see Michael Venom Page. Maybe they've seen some highlights here and there, but then they really don't know him until he gets to the UFC. I've been watching this guy for so long, man. So long. And if you stand in front of Michael Venom Page, you're getting tuned up. You are getting tuned up like a new guitar from the store, man. It's just what's going to happen. The way that he's like surfing in and out of range, I've never seen anything like it. And everyone's like, oh, it's Wonderboy Thompson. No, it's a lot more dangerous than Wonderboy Thompson, because the right hand, his arms are dangling straight down. Like one of those, what's the thing outside of the car dealership? Oh, his hands are flying. Like, he's so flimsy, and his arms are just dialing down, and then he lunges in, and a right hand comes out of nowhere, and the speed, the timing, and the guy's 37 years of age. He doesn't look like he's 37 out there fighting. He looks like he's 25. The way he moves in and out of range, and, Shara landed some very good leg kicks, and he was trying to gauge the distance and try to find the timing of MVP, but the problem is, by the time you feel like you have the timing down, it was the final minute of the fight, right? Shara started to kind of, which was part of it. He's like, I probably got to go out there and get a finish. But he just struggled all night long to find the rhythm of Michael Venom Page, because there is no rhythm, right? Everyone talks about finding the patterns. There is no patterns. That's why I say with MVP, man, like, this guy is an anomaly when it comes to the striking. There's no tells, there's no patterns, and you don't know what the hell he's going to do, right? Shara is starting to cut him off, and MVP squares it up. He's moving like a snake, going this way, that way, jumps up, throws a flying knee. And the one thing that MVP did in this fight, I don't know how many people are going to point this out, but I caught on to it after one of the first exchanges. MVP's game plan, because he's a guy that, yes, he, has this kind of freestyle out there. He had a game plan in this fight, and he knew that Shara Bullet is dangerous in close with the elbows and the knees and the spinning back fist, right? Because that when he landed those on Armen Petrosyan, he knew, if I explode in, I need to either push off on Shara Bullet, or I need to clinch up and turn it into a little bit of a grappling fest. Well, I don't mean like shooting for takedowns or anything, but get a hold of Shara Bullet and control the arms, and don't let him fire off the elbows. It was a perfect performance by Michael Venom Page. And one of the things I said, going from 170 up to 185, I thought MVP looked, in terms of the striking compared to Shara, he didn't look undersized. He didn't look undersized at all. And the speed factor, we talk about this all the time. When you're in the lighter weight class, you go up to the bigger one, these guys are faster. And when you talk about, we knew that this was probably going to be a predominantly striking match. And I know that it wasn't the most entertaining thing, right? But the thing is that people miss with MVP. He's not going to be in a war. There's going to be no crazy back and forths with MVP. It's going to be like, either catch him like Douglas Lima did back in the day, which I kept telling you guys that was a prime Douglas Lima. Perfectly timed calf kick, perfectly timed uppercut. You couldn't have scripted it any better. That's the only time MVP's basically been starch, I think, right? Outside of that, it's guys taking him down, controlling him with the grappling. Ian Gary, who is a very good striker, turned into a grappler. What'd you think was going to be different with Shara Bullet? I can't imagine having one eye going in there against MVP, dog. Like, I don't want to, but it's the facts. Like, and Shara Bullet had a great interview with Michael Bisping, and I like Shara Bullet. I think he'll bounce back, and the UFC will give him some good matchups, because he's very marketable, right? He's fun to watch. He's got a very good style. This is what happens, man. This is what happens. MVP is just too damn good on the feet. This was almost like a side mission for MVP, right? I think that this worked out for both guys, because if MVP gets a win, it can help the UFC kind of promote him a little bit. But if Shara was able to go out there and beat MVP, That would have been massive, which was the idea, right? Go in there against a high-level kickboxer, a guy coming up, to your weight class. If you could find a way to get a KO, that would have elevated Shara to the next level. But what we saw tonight, don't think Shara should get discouraged, right? Because when you talk about Shara could have 50 more fights in his career, and none of them are going to probably fight like MVP, right? MVP is almost kind of a one-of-one. He's a very tricky style, and Shara was trying to attack the legs, but eventually he was landing some early. MVP was doing a very good job of sliding in and out of range. He was defending the kicks well. He was just never there to be hit, man. That's exactly how MVP fights, and if you do not have a grappling threat or a good enough grappling threat, you're not beating MVP. That's just the bottom line. So MVP says he wants to go back to 170 pounds. I am the captain now. As MVP said, that was a badass line, man. MVP knows how to entertain, knows how to deliver. Outstanding performance by Michael Venom Page. I don't know who he fights down at 170. I think that there's probably some exciting matchups. I know there's Jeff Neal, there's Carlos Prates. I'm just listing some guys off. I think the UFC will probably, hopefully, give him another striker, because if you put him in there with any of these grapplers, it's probably going to be an issue for MVP. While his grappling's improving and we are seeing some things there, this is just more or less an entertainer, a guy that puts butts in seats. He's fun, and I think the UFC is going to play on that, considering he's 37 years of age. But Shara Bullet, he'll be back, man. Early in his UFC career, he was in there against some decent competition, and now you face one of the best strikers we've ever seen in MMA. I don't think it's no harm, no foul, really. It's just levels when it comes to the striking. MVP showed that tonight. Moving on to the big heavyweight fight between Sergei Pavlovich and Jairzinho Rozenstruik. This is what I was worried about, man. I was worried about this with Pavlovich and Rozenstruik, because I don't want to say that this was like Derek Lewis versus Francis Ngannou, but we kind of had a unique situation here, because Sergei, he had this aura, right? He had this aura where he's built like Brock Lesnar. He comes in, and I joke all the time, I'm like, what does this guy do? He just eats, power lifts, and then boxes. Like, that is literally what it seems like all Sergei does. He came into this fight, I thought, a little bit trimmer, right? He seemed a little lighter, a little faster, and his boxing looked very much on point. But he's coming off of 2 losses, right? And the first one wasn't just a loss. He went out there and got KO'd by Tom Aspinall. Then he comes out there against Alexander Volkov, to where Sergei seemed very frustrated after the fight. And anytime you fight Alexander Volkov, that's a hard guy to deal with, right? He's a skyscraper in there. He's very tall. He switches stances, and he's a very long-rangey striker who has really worked on the grappling. So that is a very hard stylistic matchup for everyone in the heavyweight division. So Sergei I feel like his confidence has been hit, man. His confidence has been dampened, and I think this fight right here was all about just getting back in the win column. Whether that was a KO, whether it was a submission, whether it was control time, whether it was a boring decision, this was all about Sergei getting back in the win column. And that's kind of just the way that I took this fight, because this was a boring matchup, right? This was a boring matchup, no question about it. But it played out pretty much how I did. I thought Sergei was going to be able to get a KO, but we saw that he has very good grappling, right? And I know that this, Jairzinho doesn't have outstanding grappling or anything like that, but Sergei, he does have, grappling in his arsenal that we never really see him use. We pretty much only see him box. He basically throws no kicks, but he does have decent takedowns that we, see from, every now and then, right? We saw it more in this fight than basically any other time. But he can control guys, right? And he's a big, strong guy. So if he gets on top of you, it's going to be a serious problem. So I like that we saw a little bit more of the grappling from Sergei in this fight, even though it was not entertaining. But guys, Jairzinho was not going to take chances in this, man. He's going in there against a crazy fast power. Did you see the speed on the hands of Sergei, dude? His hands are lightning fast for a guy that big. I mean, when he slipped and let that 1-2 rip, that looked like a lightweight throwing that. So this man has very, very dangerous boxing, crazy speed, crazy power. Jairzinho was going to be cautious. And one of the things I told you about Rozenstruik, he's a good kickboxer. That's his background. He kind of, sits there, throws a jab, pops a jab, kind of acts like he's going to throw a right hand, slaps a couple leg kicks out there. Very stuck in the mud, very plotty. He's got lazy footwork. And I'm like, that's a disaster against Pavlovich, right? Because Sergei is going to be a lot faster with the hands. And if you're not moving in and out of range very efficiently, you're going to get caught. And I thought that that's what we were going to see. But I actually like this win for Sergei, right? I think if he went out there and got a KO, that would have been better, obviously, right? It would have helped with his confidence a little bit. But I like the fact that we got to see some grappling. And I'm going to tell you why. because I think inside the top of the division, right, because he fought back in the rankings here against Rozenstruik, Sergei's a guy that the UFC likes, right? Sergei's got a big fan base. He's probably one of my favorite heavyweights for sure in MMA. I like everything about the guy. He has the aura of people want to watch this guy fight. They want to watch him go in there. They want to, see him, entertaining. They want to see him entertain guys and go in there and get these KOs. But against the top competition in the weight class, I think he's going to struggle, man. I think he's going to struggle. I think a rematch with Volkov, he struggles. A rematch with Aspinall, he struggles. So I think mixing in the grappling, adding some kicks in, and doing some other things other than just moving forward, trying to rely on the boxing, this was kind of a step in the direction of using more than just the boxing if you're Sergei Pavlovich. I'm just trying to take some positives out of this as a Sergei fan. I like the win for him, even though it was a boring fight. I like that we got to see the grappling. Jairzinho Rozenstruik, I've always just said he's kind of overrated, right? I know he's got, a kickboxing background, and he does have the ability to finish people. He does have some power, and he's got a good jab, but he's basic. He sits, he waits, and Sergei Pavlovich was way faster with the boxing. I think if he would have unloaded a little bit more, he could have found a KO on Rozenstruik. But shout out to Jairzinho, man. Outstanding chin on him, because he took some nasty shots from Pavlovich, didn't go anywhere. And also Sergei controlling, not just standing in there and brawling and giving Rozenstruik the opportunity. While this was a boring fight, I still think that it was a good win for Pavlovich. We saw some grappling, we saw the speed in the hands, we saw his defense looked on point. Good win by Sergei. I'd like to see what's next for him, because like I said, some of these big guys that, you got Aspinall, you got Gane, maybe him versus Cyril Gane, maybe that's a fight the UFC looks to book, but I think, going into a rematch with a guy like Volkov, he's going to have to mix it up a little bit. So I think that that's what Sergei knew. Came in, we got to see a little bit more from him. I like what we saw from Pavlovich. Would have loved a KO, but I'm glad to see the guy get back in the win column. Moving on, we have Said Nurmagomedov versus Vinny Oliveira. This was a good fight. I actually thought that this was a very good fight, other than the fact that both guys got dog tired, right? Both guys got dog tired, and a lot of that had to do with the crazy grappling exchanges, right? If you're one of those out there that loves to see some fun grappling like I do, this was one of those kinds of fights, right? I know that there wasn't any submissions or anything like that and some crazy ground and pound, but we saw a pretty chaotic pace, right? I know people are going to rip on Said for getting tired because he is kind of known for gassing. He looked good in the first round. I thought it was a very good round from Said. He looked fast, he looked sharp, and then it was just a matter of him getting tired. It was him getting tired and Vinny Oliveira just not giving up on himself. And he said that he was compromised coming into this fight, and we have to commend that, because this guy could have pulled out of the fight. He's like, this fight wasn't supposed to happen. And he still showed up and went in there, and I'm like, if he was compromised and he went in there and fought like that, that's incredibly impressive by Oliveira, right? And he was winging a lot of shots, which is something that I think he's going to have to tighten up if he wants to make a run in this weight class. But we saw just a relentless will tonight from Vinny Oliveira, right? That's kind of what I take away from this, and very, very good grappling, right? Said Nurmagomedov is kind of known for the dynamic striking. He's quick on the feet. He does have some grappling in his back pocket. But the way that Vinny was able to fend them off, the way that he was able to reverse positions, the way that he was able to push the pace on Said, I was very impressed from what we saw from Vinicius Oliveira. And then the fact that he was compromised, that just adds like a little extra on it to me, man, because to go out there, fight through it, go out there, get the job done, I'm impressed with what we're seeing from Oliveira, because I didn't know that he was good. I didn't think he was going to win this fight. I thought Said Nurmagomedov was going to do well with the striking. I thought he was going to mix it up on him, implement the grappling, which he tried to do, but he just got tired. He just got tired, which is partially a Said problem, but then also Vinny, he puts a pace on guys, man. He's got this chaotic style. He was landing some good shots. He attacks the legs. He was landing, he was doing a good job reversing position, doing very well in the grappling in his own right. I like what we saw from Vinny Oliveira, and considering the fact that he was compromised, very impressive win by Vinny Oliveira. I think that he's probably going to get someone ranked at this point. He's someone that I think the UFC is going to try to build. He's got the swag. He's got the fighting style. He was a little reckless tonight, though. He was a little reckless. He was getting hit by some shots by Said. But again, if you're compromised, but again, that's kind of his style, right? He's kind of a wild man in there. I think he's going to have to tighten some things up just a little bit if he wants to really make a run inside the weight class. But nonetheless, man, very impressive performance by Vinny Oliveira, and a good back and forth between the two. Moving on to Fares Ziam versus Mike Davis. This was one of those fights I was telling you guys, I'm like, on paper, this is one of the best matchups on this card. This is two high-level guys that are very well-rounded, or, they've rounded out their skill sets, because Mike Davis, I remember him back on the Contender Series in what was, in my opinion, might be the greatest Contender Series fight of all time, where it was Mike Davis versus Sadiq Youssef. Both guys went to absolute war. And then what we've seen from Mike Davis, a guy that has continuously improved his skill set, outstanding boxing, very, very good jiu-jitsu, good grappling of his own. And he came into this fight compromised, right? I think they said something like Lyme disease. You'll have to check me on that, but they said something on the broadcast, and I'm like, well, that's kind of crazy to come into a fight having, a situation like that. And then he posted on Instagram, said he had a rough week in Saudi. So all of those things definitely play a factor coming into this. But I thought Ziam was going to do pretty much what he did, right? I didn't expect such a heavy grappling approach from Mike Davis, but at the same time, I kind of did, right, I guess, because I knew that if he was going to stand that range and let Ziam go out there and turn this into a kickboxing fight, Mike Davis was going to be in trouble, because Ziam's a guy that went out there against Jai Herbert and went out there and was going back and forth with Jai Herbert, which a lot of people clown on Jai a little bit for getting KO'd by Topuria. He's one of the only guys to really put Ilya in any bit of trouble. So Jai Herbert's a very good striker, and if you're going out there outstriking him, that says a lot about you, right? And that's what I've seen from Firas Ziam, is continuous improvements in his game. Speed with the striking, speed with the kicks, with the hands, and an improved grappling all-around game. And when you do that, when you have good striking and you're getting better in the grappling and you really round out your skill set, it's going to make you a problem. And that is exactly what we are seeing from Ziam. Goes out there, gets the big KO against Matt Frevola, goes in here against a guy in Mike Davis, who I've even said I could see being a top guy in the weight class, right? I know he's into the video gaming. He, does a lot of instructing and all these different things. He's kind of a guy that he doesn't, I don't want to say Mike Davis doesn't need fighting, but he's got other things that he does, right? And with Firas Ziam, this is what Ziam does, right? Where Davis has all these other things going on. So Ziam just, to me, is a guy that takes this a little bit more serious and wants it more, right? And I know Mike Davis, he's damn good. He's very, very talented, but he's not in there a lot, right? He's not very active, and it's just kind of, he went out there, he, was able to get the win over Natan Levy, and then it's just like we see a lot of inactivity on the side of Mike Davis, where Ziam, he's getting in there a lot. He's improving with the grappling, the striking, just everything about Ziam is firing on all cylinders. This guy's a problem in the weight class. And like I said, didn't expect a grapple-heavy fight the way we saw it. I thought it was going to be more of a whirl on the feet. But this, to me, this was a very good fight. And the octagon was painted in blood, man. This was a crazy back and forth between the two. Lots of crazy grappling scrambles. I don't know how Ziam how his knee didn't rip apart. The way that Mike Davis had his leg trapped, this was a great back and forth between the two. Mike Davis, the minute I saw him come out in the first round, the way he pulled guard, I'm like, something's not right with this guy, right? And I don't want to take anything away from Ziam. I picked the guy to win the fight. I thought Ziam was going to get it done. I just thought Mike Davis didn't look like himself tonight. But either way, great performance by Firas Ziam. Guy's a problem in the weight class. Moving on to the prelims, we have Muhammad Naimov versus Khan Ofli. This fight went very much kind of how I was expecting. I thought Naimov was maybe going to be able to find a finish in this one, but Muhammad Naimov's really good, man. He's very, very good. His striking is improving. His footwork was on point tonight. The way he was switching stances, the way he was mixing up the targets when it came to the striking, and even having success of his own when it came to the grappling. This is a guy that he's becoming a problem in the weight class, right? And what I like about Muhammad Naimov is he is continuing to better his skill set, right? We saw very, very good footwork. The way he was kind of rolling his shoulders, never keeping his head on the center line. He was just doing a lot of really good things, and the small things and the technicalities, I saw those improvements tonight. And Khan Ofli, he's got a good camp, right? Over there with Volkanovski and those guys. And look, Khan Ofli, he's a good fighter. He's a well-rounded guy. He's got pretty good grappling, and that's why I was like, I just don't know how he beats Muhammad Naimov, because coming into this, I'm like, Naimov does everything better than him, and that's kind of what this fight came down to. So Muhammad goes out there, wins a decision over Ofli. This was a good performance, because I think Ofli is a well-rounded fighter. I think he's got a good skill set. Just the improvements that we're seeing fight in and fight out from Muhammad Naimov, I'm impressed. I like what we saw from him in terms of the striking. He's got a fun style to watch. Very good win from Muhammad Naimov. Moving on, the GOAT, Shamil Gaziev. Before I get into this breakdown, this is why John Jones is retiring. This is why John Jones is going to retire. The inevitable, man. The inevitable of Shamil Gaziev on the rise in the heavyweight division. Did you see that right hand, man? Did you see the speed of Shamil on the feet? Shamil's, in all seriousness, man, his right hand looked like a jab. His right hand looked like a jab tonight. And Shamil kind of has like this awkward style to where he just kind of like moves forward. His hands are down. I think he's like chewing on his mouthpiece or something, but he's kind of like, It looks like he's smiling or making faces at guys. And he's just like right there. And as an opponent, I'd be like, let me hit this dude in the face, man. And he's just right at the edge of range where he slides right out of range and then bang. He was landing that right hand at will. And a lot of that was he kind of shifted his body weight to where he was almost kind of square, to where it then allows that rear hand to come out a lot faster. That's exactly what we saw from Shamil in this fight. And I thought he was going to win this fight by decision. I didn't think that he was going to get a finish in this because Thomas Petersen, former LFA champion, I believe, he's got pretty good striking. He's a southpaw. He's kind of tricky in terms of the boxing. Nothing was tricky tonight. I mean, Shamil went out there, had almost no respect for him. Got in his face, was right at the edge of range, and was ready to slide in, was popping him with the right. I mean, we saw almost no jabs from Shamil at all. It was all basically straight right hands. Maybe that's something they saw on film, given it's a southpaw orthodox matchup, that kind of kills the jab a little bit, right? It kind of turns it into a straight right hand, left hook kind of game, and that's exactly what we saw from Shamil. The way the adjustments, he didn't even have to rely on the grappling tonight, that forward pressure, sitting right at the edge of range, waiting for Thomas to come to him, and then he would just slide back with that counter right hand and even pop him on the offense with the right hand. This was a very, very good and impressive performance by Shamil Gaziev. I was beyond impressed with the hand speed of Shamil in this fight. And I'm being serious, man. I know we all joke around about Shamil, but seriously, this was a crazy performance. And he might be Thanos, man. I mean, can Tom Aspinall and everyone shivering in their boots, man, starting to keep the throne warm for Shamil, man. This guy with the hand speed, the way he was moving forward, the pressure. I like what we saw from Shamil in this fight. This was a great win by Shamil Gaziev. In all seriousness, seriously, it was. Moving on to Terrence McKinney, T-Rex versus Damir Hadzovic. Not much to break down in this fight. I had said, listen, Terrence McKinney should absolutely go out there and destroy Damir Hadzovic in this fight. And if he doesn't, he should have probably retired from fighting, because Damir is a guy who's not active at all. He's kind of, what was he, 14-7 coming into this, 38 years of age. This was basically the UFC saying, look, Terrence, you're active. You're fun, you're young, you've done us some favors, you step up here and there on short notice. We're going to give you as close of a layup as we can. That's exactly what this fight was. And Terrence McKinney, fair play, went out there and made it look like the layup that it should have been. Goes out there, starts fast, gets right in Damir's face, and doesn't give him any opportunities to get going with anything. Because while Damir is not the best guy in the world, he's still got crazy power, right? He still does have good power, and that's where I was concerned, right? Because T-Rex, he's kind of a hard guy to trust, right? Because early on, he could probably finish just about anybody in the weight class. But then as it goes past the first 2 minutes of the fight, then you're worried about if he doesn't get a finish, are we going to see McKinney get KO'd, right? That's kind of how his fights seem to go. But from what we saw from McKinney, he was way faster. The youth, was just on his side. The way he was moving in out of range, he was just absolutely toying with Damir in this fight. Absolute one-sided ass whooping, was not even close. This is what I was expected. We just always have a little bit of doubt in our mind, at least I do, whenever it comes to Terrence McKinney. But hey, he went out there and did exactly what he should have done. And I'm serious. If McKinney lost that fight, he should have contemplated retiring, man, because that was a fight he absolutely should have won. Moving on, a couple more here. Jasmine Jasdavicius versus Mayra Bueno Silva. I told you guys, man. That curse from men's MMA, women's MMA, going from bantamweight down to flyweight. There's a curse, man. Cody Garbrandt, TJ Dillashaw, Mayra Bueno Silva, Jose Johnson recently. These fighters that go from bantamweight that are like, you know what, man? I'm going to go down to 125 and try to bully these folks around. It never works, man. It never works. And I don't know if it's the weight cut gets to them, or what I think it is maybe a little bit of the weight cut. But a lot of it is the 125ers are so skilled. They're so fast. They're so technical. And there is really no flaws in the games of the flyweights. They're Energizer bunnies, mile a minute, and everything is very technical. That's exactly what you saw tonight from Jasmine, right? She's not the most powerful on the feet. She doesn't have outstanding striking per se, but she can pepper you. She does have solid timing. And when it comes to the grappling, she just has it. She absolutely has it. And she has very good control. The way she flows, the way she looks for submissions, and even in her other fights, the way that she's able to find submissions is incredibly impressive. We even saw some very good submission defense of her own against a good grappler of her own, that is Mayra Bueno Silva. So this was a big win for Jasmine, right? A big name in women's MMA in Bueno Silva. A lot of people know who she is. She's, fought for the title at 135. She comes down looking the bully around the flyweights. Jasmine says, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to out-grapple you. I'm going to land good ground and pound. I'm going to touch you up on the feet. Very, very dominant win by Jasmine. She went out there and did exactly what I was anticipating. The speed, the technicalities, the way she blends it all together. Huge win for Jasmine Jasudavicius. Very, very impressive. I'm happy for her. I'm glad she got the job done. And again, Mero Bueno Silva, pretty game opponent, right? She had a decent career up at 135 pounds. She's fought for the title. She's got some power, got some submissions in her back pocket. Jasmine is just the better fighter. It's as simple as that. That's what I expected coming into this fight. Great win by Jasmine. And hey, she's the face of Canada MMA right now. They thought it was going to be Mike Malott. He's trash. Jasmine Jasudavicius, she is the face of, you got your new GSP, Canada. It's Jasmine Jasudavicius. Okay, two more here. Bogdan Grad versus Lucas Alexander. I expected Bogdan Grad to win this fight. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. After seeing that first round, I was like, I think I'm going to get this pick wrong. I think Bogdan's going to get KO'd because Lucas Alexander, I mean, I think Felder said it on the broadcast. I had to kind of rinse my eyes for a second. I'm like, is that a young Edson Barboza? Like, Lucas Alexander was firing off some dangerous kicks to the body, to the leg, the speed, the movement. I'm like, this doesn't look good for Bogdan, right? And he's new into the UFC, and we see this all the time where these new guys, they come in, and it's like that first test against a guy who, yes, Lucas Alexander isn't a world beater, but he has the UFC experience. And a lot of these guys weaponized that. He was landing a lot of good shots on Bogdan Grad, and Grad doesn't move his head at all, which is one of the reasons I was concerned. But Bogdan Grad came through, man, and he did exactly what I anticipated. Landed some good shots to the body, mixed things up, implemented the grappling, got some good ground and pound in there, controlled Alexander, and was able to find, the good shots on the ground. I like what we saw from Bogdan Grad. And this was a good win, right? Because whenever you watch Bogdan fight, if you've never seen him fight before, this is kind of what it looks like, right? It's like early on, he's kind of getting his ass beat. It's not going his way. And then as the fight starts to play out, he comes into his own, right? He's not a first-round fighter. He's one of those guys that if it's a 15-minute fight, you're going to see him start to be at his best in that second round, is normally where you see Bogdan start to come alive, start to control the fight. That's exactly what we saw in this fight. Good performance by Bogdan Grad again. Got to work on the defense, though. Doesn't move his head at all. Lucas was trying to walk him into some traps. Good win, though, by Bogdan Grad, considering how early he is in his UFC career. Way to get it done, Bogdan Grad. All right, last but not least, first fight of the night between Hamdy Abdulwahab and Jamal Pogues. I picked Hamdy to win the fight, so I'm happy Hamdy won the fight. But this fight to me, right, everyone's going to cry robbery. Everyone's going to, Jake, it was a robbery. It was a robbery. It was a robbery. You have to say it's a robbery, Jake. I'm not going to say it's a robbery. I don't think I'm going to say it's a robbery. You know why? Because this fight was absolute dog shit. And whenever there's a dog shit fight, that's what happens. How are you going to claim robbery? What do you think, Jamal Pogues? I'm going to call him Jamal Hogues. You think Jamal Hogues went out there and he put on an absolute clinic against Hamdy? No, he didn't. Yeah, he landed some decent shots, but little Jamal out there, he's out there, like I told you guys before, picks and pokes his ways to these decisions. He never looks for finishes, and that has always been my critique from Jamal. Goes out there just kind of picking and poking, smiling. Yeah, come on, Hamdy. Look for a finish. If you knew that if you had any questions about losing a decision coming into this, go out there and try to find a finish. You're a heavyweight. And by the way, in case you're not familiar with Jamal, he goes out there and most of his fights are decision losses or decision wins. This is a guy that is just a decision merchant. And that's what I said about Jamal. Went out there, left it in the hands of the judges. And Hamdy, while he didn't go out there and land a ton of shots on Jamal, he landed some big shots, right? Especially in the first round. He, implemented the grappling a little bit, but after that grappling exchange, Hamdy looked incredibly tired, and Jamal was smiling at him like, you're tired, man. What did Jamal do? He just sat there and taunted at him and did absolutely fuck all. He did nothing. So all these people saying, Jamal, he got robbed. This fight was garbage. It was bad by both guys. Hamdy got tired after one bit of grappling and then was kind of coasting through the round. I thought Hamdy probably won the first round, right? And then we get into the second round. He landed some big shots. Whenever Hamdy went, even though he didn't throw a lot, they did more than what Jamal did. And I know Jamal did land some good shots. So I know people are going to say robbery. The reason I'm saying it's not a robbery, it was a dog shit fight from both guys. This wasn't like both dudes went up and it was this really competitive fight, but Jamal Pogues was just putting it on him, man. He was convincingly going out there. He was walking down Hamdy. He was beating him up. He was taunting him, throwing, shots here, dipping around, waving. Like, it wasn't like that. That's how people are acting when they talked about this fight. Who cares if it was a robbery or not? It was a dog shit performance by both Guys, Jamal Pogues does not have a killer instinct. He's boring. He picks and pokes with shots as a heavyweight. And then Hamdy, he's got a lot of work to do. For a guy that has this extensive, Greco-Roman background, goes out there, he does have power. He is fun on the feet. He's a guy that's willing to exchange. He got tired after one grappling exchange. That's embarrassing. That's embarrassing, in my opinion, to get tired after one grappling exchange. So that's what I think of the fight. It was absolute dog shit. So to say that it was a robbery, I don't really care. I don't care if it was or wasn't. I don't think it was because the fight was so bad. And given what these guys, gave the judges to score, wasn't a whole lot. Hamdy was constantly moving forward. Jamal was doing a lot of talking while picking and poking like he normally does. Wasn't a good fight. Who cares about this one, in my opinion? But if you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Comment your thoughts down below. Subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you do not miss an upload. I would appreciate it. See you next time.